Welcome to the next episode of the CAPB podcast. Today we are joined by former Royal Signals and UK Special Forces veteran Ben Gallagher. Welcome, Ben.
Cheers, Matt and Paul. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to this, actually.
Mate, we were looking forward to having you on, mate.
Looking forward to it.
Hopefully we can get all the sweat and the heat edited out of the final cut because it is hot in the core of the earth today. Just so happens we're recording on the hottest day of the year. So thank you, Great Britain.
Well, I mean, what more can we ask for, right? We moan when it's cold and then we shimp when it's hot, so...
Tell me about it, mate.
Mate, amazing. So, Ben, you did just over 16 years. If you could give like a highlight of your military career, what would that look like?
I mean, I was pretty privileged throughout a lot of my career to chase some pretty amazing opportunities. And I found myself in some pretty surreal circumstances. And I sort of have conversations with people nowadays, and I explain that it is genuinely opportunities and experiences that money can't buy. Like, it has been super cool. But actually, one of probably the most surreal experiences, which I found very interesting at the time, was sat on the embassy roof out in a place in the Middle East. And an opposing force was rolling through said city in tanks. And it wasn't actually to have a go at us, the Brits or the Americans. It was actually to have a go at the government that was trying to run that country. And it was just so fascinating to watch and such a weird, surreal experience. So yeah, that was pretty phenomenal, knowing that we'd had an impact some months before on trying to shape how the government was working and what was going on in that country. Equally not being affected initially by what was going on in that country, and then following that, not being touched and allowed to leave the country in a safe manner because they just wanted to get a grip of all the stuff that was going on there and change the way that this government was running this country following a massive coup. That was really, really surreal but really cool, and an amazing opportunity to be part of that. Shaping and supporting, bit of training and mentoring some local forces. So yeah, that's probably one that sticks in my head quite a bit, just because of the nature of the security element of it, the physical risk to life and all that kind of stuff that was going on, the nature of what was going on in the city, and then that element of all the training that you do. You know, I know we end up in scenarios in different operations around the world, but those scenarios that you end up in, yeah, it was just phenomenal. It was just super cool. So that's probably one that comes to the forefront of my head out of amongst many. You know, like I said, I've been involved in many cool opportunities, but yeah, definitely that one. And then probably one as more of a personal thing is badging into UKSF. You know, that day after 6 months, and actually, if I rewind a little bit, I wanted to get out of my 12-year point. Very shortly after that, that's when I applied for selection, and I was done with the military. It was changing. It wasn't the military that I joined, but actually getting to that point and achieving my beret and the environment and the blokes that I'll be working with, and actually being in that environment where you are then again around like-minded, driven individuals who want to be there. That was quite a personal, really cool achievement of mine. So yeah, quite two extremes, but both with quite substantial outcomes. But yeah,
I think that's phenomenal. First of all, passing selection is phenomenal, incredible. I think it's like a real interesting one that at your 12-year point, it was either get out or do the most focused and military thing I could possibly do. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. What was the decision, mate? Where it was like, I'm going to get out and do this and maybe work whatever as a civvy, or fuck it.
I'd already attempted selection when I was 21. Obviously, some years prior. I think it was probably about 2008, 2009, I think it was. And I was young, naive. I did a Herrick in 2007, where I was working in the ops room and I saw these geezers coming and going in alley kit with beards, and no one would touch them or say anything to them. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then I worked on the ops desk when there was some night ops going on, and I was obviously privy to watch and be part of those going on the other end of the radio, obviously in the safe environment. And when I got back, that just constantly drilled into my head that I wanted to. It almost became, how can I put it, like impulsive, that I wanted to go and do it. Like I was everything I thought about that. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go give this a go. And then I obviously applied, did the briefing course, passed, and went on the winter selection. But I came off with an injury. So back then, hills used to be 4 weeks. And I got to the end of week 3 before test week, and obviously came off with a back injury, and went back to the unit. And I was like, nah, I'm not gonna let this down. I'm gonna. So I went and did my PTI's course. I went and did other bits and pieces. Went and learned, developed as an individual. Went and spent some time at another specialist unit, to be in that environment, to hopefully give me a bit of an insight, a little bit more, and a bit more of an opportunity to learn and develop. And then things changed, opportunities changed, my direction in my military career changed, and then I just got a bit annoyed and sort of pissed off with the military in a way. And that was around my 11 year point. I just picked up my sergeant at the time as well, and I was just like, I just don't want to be in this environment anymore. I can't see my military career continuing, but now is a good opportunity for me to leave and go and start another career on Civvy Street. But I always had this little niggle in the back of my head that I was going to give it a go again. So I had a bit of an issue. I was a section commander at ATR Winchester. One of my recruits called bluff against me, and I got sanctioned as a military sanction, and nothing happened. She actually thought she was going to lose her military career. She thought she was going to get kicked out of basic training because she wasn't achieving the standard. And all that came forward, and she basically blamed me for a load of stuff and made up these allegations. And I got RTU'd out of the unit for a period of time. And obviously that then tarnished my career. Even though I'd done nothing wrong, that had tarnished my career. But when I went back to I got RTU'd to a different unit, because obviously I wasn't part of what you'd call your home unit back then. The CO at the time went, right then, now it's all done, put together, all put to bed. How can I help you? And I was like, well, I don't want to stay at this unit, that's for starters. I said, I've really got this. I want to sign off and get out, but I've really got this itch that I want to scratch, and I want to go back on selection again. So he said, look, right, go on your senior CLM, get that ticked off for your career courses whilst you're in a green unit, and we can support that for you. Whilst you're away, I'll get all your paperwork done for the briefing course again and get that sent off, and I'll support you as much as I can. And he did. He completed all the paperwork. I went away, got top student on my senior CLM, which added to the sort of support element and that backing from the CO. And then, I went away and subsequently went on selection. So that's what changed my course of events. There was that element, that thing with a recruit at basic training, but also there was a whole raft of things building up to that. I was just like, the army's changed too much. It's not the military that I joined. It's not the environment I want to be in anymore. But that knowing that going to Hereford would have put me in an environment where it's a great place to be. It's around like-minded, driven people again. That's what my push was, to get away from the Green Army and get back into that environment kind of thing.
That almost pivotal point of that CO, just making that like, listen, we've got your back. That must have been such a sort of weight off your shoulders at that point, because they could have turned around and gone, right, you're in here now. No, you're not going to selection, blah blah blah, and then 6 months down the line, you've signed off and you're a civvy, your whole life is completely in a different trajectory. Just for him to say that, I mean, looking back at it now, I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, like, at the time as well. So this was what would have been late 2000s, 2009, 10. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit later. Yeah, slightly.
So, yeah, I think that for me, I would imagine that was kind of a pivotal point for you to be able to go on to these new opportunities. I just think, wow.
Yeah, even as a newly promoted sergeant, like, he was losing one of his new senior officers out of the unit, and he gave me almost 8 months off, not off. I had to turn into work on occasions, but he knew I was away training. I had to send my platoon commander check-ins every now and again, just say this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm training, this is my plan for this week. Just obviously so they knew where I was. But he literally gave me probably almost 8 months off to train in order to prepare myself again in the right way. So yeah, massive. Like you say, he could have gone, nah, you're newly promoted sergeant, you're in the unit now. This is you for the foreseeable. I think actually he knew how much I wanted to sign off. We'd had quite an in-depth conversation about my frustrations. I think he also knew how frustrated I'd been from the outcome of this incident that clearly wasn't my fault. I held my hands up from day one, and I was like, this is not me. This is, blah, 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 blah. Tried to fight my case as much as I could. So he saw my frustrations from that, but he also understood how much of a driven soldier I was and how much this meant to me. And actually, by allowing someone to do that and almost stay in the military is better than going, I'm going to keep you in unit and I'm going to lose you down the line at some point eventually anyway.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, that level of leadership, because it was, for him, it's a 0-win game, because he either lets you get out and he loses a soldier, or he supports you to go at selection and he loses a soldier. So, mate, and that's a class story, that, because we all served. And it's like, there are so many times when you've had such shit leaders and shit bosses where you're like, who just either want to protect their own train set, or they just, for no reason, won't support that thing. So the fact that you were supporting that is class. Mate, so fast forward, you've had a great career in the Royal Signals, you've transferred over your UKSF, and then you get injured. Are you happy to talk about that?
Yes. I was serving at Hereford, and in a nutshell, basically, it was on counter-terrorism. So I wasn't actually injured overseas on operations, which was part of my frustration, which I'll probably cover again a little bit in a bit. But it was on a UK counter-terrorism training job. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know how you want to put it, with the outcome at the end of the day. I was shot 7 times and received blast and fragmentation injuries to my upper torso and both arms. Basically, circumstances had happened, which I obviously won't go into, but someone had ended up loading their weapon system with live ammunition, and I subsequently was the firing position which they fired at. I was the main hostage taker on the scenario, and yeah, during the incident. But from about a metre away, he engaged me as a target and put 7 rounds into me. In what capacity, we don't know how that happened. I'm not sure how the rounds fully went into me, but luckily, I decided to put my plate carrier on, which is actually here on my radiator next to me. So this is the plate carrier that I wore when I got shot. I decided to put that on only half an hour before the incident kicked off, just because some kit fitted better. Again, not purely through choice, basically. And put my plate carrier on, and that saved my life pretty much. I got holes in both sides of my chest where the rounds had tumbled into me. My left arm took the brunt of the impact, so I'm quite heavily scarred down my left arm, and then I've got quite severe scarring on my right arm. But yeah, basically got hit, was overwhelmed with what happened, massive rush of adrenaline. Remember looking down at my arm and seeing it pretty much hanging off. And that fight, flight, freeze kicked in, again, quite highly med trained. And I knew I needed to stem the bleeding. So I remember pressing my thumb into my artery under my arm and lifting it above my heart to try and stem the bleeding. And then this hole on this arm here was like spurting out. So I sort of stood in this position with this in front of my face, spurting out, whilst this part of my arm was pretty much hanging off. And then I just remember guys just jumping on me and going, just get on the floor. I was trying to get my helmet off. And yeah, ended up with a tourniquet on both arms and a chest seal on my right chest, and then was obviously evacuated to hospital. And then recovery followed from there, basically.
Fucking hell, mate.
So yeah. pretty
Mate,
shit in the office, to say the least.
When did you realise in that instant? Because you were obviously playing enemy, and we've all played enemy at some point. We've all played enemy. We've all been there, and and all that kind of stuff. And it's almost a bit of a crack in it, when you're doing that kind of thing. When did you realise that? Fucking hell, I'm hurt here.
So it was weird. I've tried to work with a psychologist to piece together the few seconds when I actually got shot, and my brain has completely abolished it. I remember everything else. I remember stepping through the doorway. I remember taking a step forward, then bang, I got hit. And seconds later, I remember looking at my arm, obviously that incident of trying to stem the bleeding. Then I was like trying to unclip my ops core helmet. And then there was like a bit of a moment where I didn't feel any of this. Adrenaline had just completely took over my body. And then I was sort of lay on the floor, had the tourniquets on. There was a little bit of a conversation going on above me, and then there was mention of live ammunition. No, sorry, initially there was mention of a dog. So we're taught in the special forces that if they send a dog in, again, once those manlies are going for something, it's going for, you can't stop it. You're taught to try and wrap something around your non-dominant arm and let the dog take it. And because of it was on my forearm and the way it was on the top and the bottom of my arm where it had blown through, it sort of probably could have looked like the dog had ripped my arm, but couldn't explain the rest of my body. And there was initially a little bit of a conversation about that. And then I remember one of the guys getting up from by the side of me and walking away and coming back, or walking away and saying something. And I just remember live ammunition being mentioned. And I was like, what the fuck is what? I literally couldn't process what had happened. And it actually wasn't until probably, I don't remember the first week in hospital, it was probably the second week in hospital when one of the guys come to visit me and sort of mentioned actually what had properly happened. And then the fallout was obviously a report and all that kind of stuff. And that's where I got to read the proper depth of the investigation. And that's when it sort of properly came to light. It wasn't really till that point that I didn't find out the full effects of what had happened. I actually thought they'd put a charge on the door, and I'd open the door as the charge blew. That was more realistic with the kind of injuries that I had. That's what I sort of had in my head. Even still after there was mention of live ammunition. It wasn't until I got the report that came out that actually highlighted all the issues that I'd sustained and why it had happened, kind of thing. So.
And like you said, mate, the level of frustration that you must have had being injured in training in the UK, and I'm not saying like being injured anywhere is hideous, but it's almost like it's more not acceptable. What's the right word? What is expected if you're in theatre?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Whereas there was no point that day where you were playing enemy where you thought this could be it.
Well, I suppose on the two sides of both of those points is operations. You deploy, shit's going to happen. You're trained for that, and it's a fallout of being in that environment, right? I know many people that have been injured on operations, and it's the nature of going to war. On the flip of that, being in the environment that I was in, I probably should have been in the safest environment. I had the best kit on the market with probably the best trained people in the world in a controlled environment in the UK. Well, without going into it too much, but there was a lot of failings on those points that I just mentioned. So, so that's where that frustration came from. The other frustration was the fact that I was so focused on a full career in the military and accepting that element of I'm now classed as disabled. My arm doesn't function properly, and I've got to either finish my military career off non-deployable or limited deployability with the issues that I've got, or face the fact that I'm going to get medically discharged. And obviously the latter happened, but quite a difficult process. And then I just want to add as well, like that was one major incident that happened at the start of 2019. I was also going through a very toxic divorce with my ex-wife. I wasn't, struggling to see my kids and all that kind of stuff. So on top of a career issue, I was also, having father issues as well. And then my grandfather brought me up when I was a kid. my mum and dad were publicans. They ran pubs, so they spent a lot of time working, and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. So I spent a lot of time with my granddad, and he got taken ill very quickly at the back end of the year before, and died 3 weeks after I came out of hospital. So I wasn't given any time to spend with my granddad. So I not only had I lost my father figure, but I'd also lost being a father as well, and my career all at the same time. So needless to say, 2019 does not exist in my diary because it was a pretty shit year.
Mate, any one of those things, are hideous to deal with.
Yeah,
Like any one of them are hideous to deal with at any age, and I think to have them all at the same time, mate, must have been a pretty dark place.
yeah, it was difficult, but again, I use that as my. It sounds weird, but I use that as my ammunition to keep moving forward. Like that was my drive to keep pushing. Like I had issues, don't get me wrong, and what followed leaving hospital. So I spent 5 weeks in hospital. Should have been 10 weeks, but I was so driven to get out of a hospital ward. As we all know, hospitals are horrible places. So by week 4, I was up on my feet. I was making my bed in the morning. I was doing my morning routine, and then I'd sit in my chair. I'd go for 2 walks in the day, one before lunch and one after lunch. The physios would come in every day, and I'd do my exercise routine. So I was so driven to get out of that bloody hospital because it was just a horrible place to sort of get some normal routine going. And then I spent 8 months on full-time rehab. Again, quite fortunate that Hereford's got a full rehab centre, which I took huge advantage of for that 8 month period. But I was in full-time rehab pretty much 9 till 4 every day, learning to use my arm again and trying to get fully fit again. And then I tried to return to work at the back end of that year, and subsequently went back to work for a period of time, and I just wasn't the soldier that I was before. I basically had the blinkers on, trying to get tunnel vision to that light at the end of the tunnel to be who I was before, and it wasn't the case. And then it was actually my girls. I got twin girls. It was actually their birthday in the February, and I wasn't allowed to see them. I had no communication with them. I was also I was heavily overdosing on medication, and I was drinking excessively. I was also using fitness as a punishment, so I'd go out and beast myself in order to aggravate my injuries and physically, like, beast myself basically to try and numb the pain. I remember coming in off this run. I think I'd run about 12 or 13k. Came in, literally got straight in the shower in my running kit and broke down in tears. I was just absolutely broken. And I remember turning the shower on, freezing cold, and just sat in the bottom of it in tears for I don't remember how long. And then I got out the shower and I was like, look, I need to try and get myself sorted. And I went upstairs to try and make myself dinner, and subsequently tried to take my life. So again, that eventually took its toll on me. That all built up over that course of those months. I think that those 3 great things, big things that I dealt with at the start of that year, and then trying to return to work and not being the soldier that I was, just ground me down and obviously took that effect on me. Yeah, it wasn't until I woke up the morning after. Again, I think being heavily intoxicated actually helped the circumstance. I think I was too drunk to follow it all the way through, but that was my intention, and I tried as far as I'm aware. But I woke up the next morning with my now wife Kate sat at the end of my bed, obviously in tears, who was there to basically say, we're going to get this sorted and we're going to get you back on the straight and narrow. And that was a huge turning point for me. I didn't want to lose Kate. I didn't want the kids to lose their dad, regardless of whether I have communications with them or not. I'm still their father. I wanted to prove to my granddad, even though he wasn't here anymore, that I was still the soldier that he came and watched me pass out however many years previously. And I wanted to prove to the medics on the day that they did the right thing to save my life. So there's a whole raft of mental things going through my head at that moment in time, and so I did. I got put back on sick leave, and I really used that to my advantage to really get my shit in order, and got back on the phys train, got off the medication, stopped drinking, reached out for mental health support, had a psychologist, and yeah, just that was my recovery journey. Really started almost a year and a half after my injuries. Then, so yeah, crazy journey.
Horrible journey, mate.
Yeah,
Horrible journey. I mean, I think it's a testament. Like, and I'll just give the medics a shout out here, because as I say, I was 23 years. I was med corps mate. I've been fortunate enough to work at MAB, and I think a medic's point of view, going to a training activity, it's easy to not saying not take it seriously, but it's easy to go, it's range med cover. It's very rare that on a day like when you're covering that you need to do all of those things, and that, the fact that you're still here today after taking 7 rounds is a testament to them, which is, and you and your resilience. Shout out Kate, man. Do you know what I mean? Shout out, because sometimes it takes a specific moment and a person to just change stuff around. And you had, from the outside, even you telling your story back to us, it's like you doing everything right. You were rehabbing, you were training, you were trying to get back to work, and it was almost like, do you know what I mean? But that's just on the surface, and underneath you were still very much like in the locker, mate.
and to be fair to her, like, we were only 6 months into a relationship, so she could have gone, "You're mental, mate. I'm off."
Yeah.
So, yeah. Like, do you know what? Do you know what I mean? And she did, like, and she's been my rock ever since. Like, we got on so well in the first place because we had so much in common. But I think this just made us even stronger. For her to stay by my side and support me through my actual recovery journey that followed that suicide attempt, was just phenomenal. And now well, not so much now because I'm in a pretty good place, but probably a couple of years ago, I'd come back in from doing something, or I'd be at home and she'd come home from work, and she'd be like, "Right, come on, get your shoes on, we're going out for a walk." And I'm like, "No, no, no, it's fine." She was like, "No, come on." And she picked up that I'd not had a good day, or she basically she knew me well, and she obviously knows me even better today. But yeah, she's been my rock, my soulmate, my partner in crime, my best friend, and now my wife. And yeah, I'm very privileged to to have married her August last year, and I brought some of these points up at the wedding because everyone that was sat in the audience were all close friends, very close friends or family, and they obviously all know my journey. And I don't think they quite knew those elements as much. And I think 70% of the room were in tears for the right reasons. But hearing that part of my story, and yeah, she's been amazing, mate. She's been a real source of humility and happiness and joy and support, and yeah, she's cool.
I think it's class, mate. I think it's absolutely class. With your rehab, right? So you've done you were super fit anyway. Right, you were super fit anyway. To pass selection, you've got to be. And then once you, like, as you say, once after you'd started to turn stuff around and focus. When did you start rowing?
So what followed the journey? So if I continue post rehab, so I then sat a med board in February. I was then told I was getting medically discharged. In the October, I was out of the military. So obviously that was quite a difficult period. This was probably a year or two after the incident, maybe. Yeah. So that all happened. I started to work for a civvy company in London part time. That all overlapped. So I sort of forgot about being medically discharged because I was now in a full time job, and transitioned out of the military. Alongside that journey, I'd also, while sat at home on sick leave, whilst all this was going on, I was doom scrolling as we do through social media, and I came across this post. So I was connected to the Armed Forces Para Snow Sports team, and I came across this post posted through an organisation called Kayak for Heroes. Long and short of the challenge was it was initially 4 injured veterans. It became 5 when I was I was forced into the team following their 3rd training camp, which was my first training camp. I very quickly found myself in a kayaking boat and part of the team, and we kayaked from Land's End to John O'Groat. So super cool journey, super cool challenge with some like-minded, driven people, and we raised a ridiculous amount for the Armed Forces Para Snowsport team. So a really rewarding adventure as well. But what they didn't know was at the time was all that I was going through. It gave me focus, direction, purpose. Again, another little brotherhood of blokes that I could chew the fat with, have some banter with, push myself with. So that was really cool. So that was my journey back into challenging sport, testing environments, and the world of adventure sport. Then, fast forward a year, I ran across the Sahara Desert. So I did Marathon des Sables, 6 days in 250 kilometers in 50-degree heats, again to raise money for charity. And this was my spark and drive to do stuff. So that was a really cool journey. By this point, I was obviously out. I was working in industry, and I'd sort of transitioned my life to Civvy Street. Someone approached me and said, I think you should apply for the Invictus Games. And I was like, I don't think the Invictus Games is for me. I've got all 4 limbs. I'm in a good place. I'm recovering. I've got a job. Blah, 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 all the other stuff. And they went, I think you should. Anyway, I went away and thought about it. And then I met another friend, Scott Mina, who's an ex-Parage lad who's just done the Winter Games as a Nordic cross-country skier. And I think we had a brief conversation about it. And he went, honestly, do it. He did it some years prior. So I went online and researched Invictus Games, blah, 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 and I had a look into it. And I was like, actually, it looks pretty cool. I looked at it from an angle that this was my recovery journey, but this was also an opportunity to get back into competitive sport. It was also an opportunity to learn a new sport or sports and be in an environment where I could potentially wear the Union flag again and represent my country in a different way. I could test myself again. I could push my limits again, blah, 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 blah. And there's a bit of a process to it, a selection process. So I liked that element of it, that element of I've got to push myself through a selection process. I thought, fuck it, let's give it a go. So I applied in 2022. There was a series of engagement camps, they call them, where you go along and try some sports and then you apply for the games. And then in the start of 23, I found out I was selected to represent Team UK in Dusseldorf in Germany later that year for the Invictus Games. And I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. So then what followed was obviously a number of months of training. And I initially chose 4 sports. Powerlifting, because I liked weights, I liked training in the gym. Archery, because it was a new sport, something to learn, and you really have to be in the moment with archery. You can't let anything distract you. Rowing, because I used to use rowing as part of a gym routine and CrossFit workouts and all that gubbins. So I wanted to give it a go competitively, and it was actually almost probably the only sport out of all the sports that Invictus were offering that year that was the most that I had to focus on with my main injury with my hand. And then cycling. I used to race triathlon whilst I was in the army, and I struggled to get back on a bike because of unclipping on my left foot and falling onto my left hand and causing further injuries. Anyway, so they were my 4 sports. As the games got closer, I found out that archery was on the same day as cycling, so I had to drop archery. So my 2 main sports I wanted to go to the games for was rowing and cycling. Was dropped because of obviously cycling, and powerlifting just doesn't go with 2 endurance sports. I was trying to push cycling and rowing, and then powerlifting was at a detriment, or I was trying to build weight for the powerlifting, and the other 2 were at a detriment. So I had to sort of drop powerlifting because it just didn't fit. So I focused on rowing and cycling. So going into the rowing journey, I was very fortunate to be coached by a GB start coach during the Invictus Games engage phase, and Claire is a very good coach, and she picked up that I was pretty handy on an erg, and she said, I think we should explore this a little bit further than just the Invictus Games. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, this sounds quite interesting, but yeah, I'll go with it. We'll see what happens. So in April of 23, April of 23, Maidenhead Rowing Club were organising or hosting a classification event for para-athletes. So I went down, obviously did a number of tests and fitness things, had to do a little bit of rowing on an erg, and subsequently was classified PR3 as a classified rower. You got 3 levels of classification. PR1 is basically shoulders and arms. PR2 is trunk, shoulders and arms, and PR3 is anything else that's classifiable. So obviously, because of the limitations to my hand and wrist, that's what made me classifiable. So that was in April 23. Bearing in mind, I was going to the games in September 23. So I then was invited back to Maidenhead Rowing Club. The reason why that happened is because a gentleman called Nick Steele, who's still a very good mate of mine, became my coach. He was coaching at Maidenhead Rowing Club, and he invited me down and said, I think now you're classified. I've never been on the water before this point. I think you should start to row on the water. And I was like, well, yeah, that might make sense, really. Now I'm classified. So I did. I went down at the end of May. I think it was the 27th of May, 2023, and that was my first session on the water as a rower, never mind an adapted rower. So then learnt to row, did the program on the build up to the games. 8 weeks before the games, I was introduced to a development coach through British Rowing, and that's when I joined the GB rowing team. So that was a really cool journey through 2023. Lots of learning, lots of engaging in different elements of rowing, and lots of I love learning new stuff and developing. So that was a really cool year for me. Anyway, 8 weeks before the games, did the GB development start program. It's meant to be 12 weeks long. Completed it in 8 weeks. Had 2 weeks tapering before the games, and then went to the Invictus Games. And wow, what an amazing environment! 26 nations, 550 competitors from around the world. And it's basically like the Paralympics on steroids. It's absolutely phenomenal. Like, your family and friends are there. Everyone's from a like-minded, driven background. Everyone's been injured through service or still serving, and they've managed to retain in service. And just a phenomenal environment. Really cool. So I went to the games, competed. I competed in 2 sports, 4 disciplines. So I completed in cycling. I did a men's criterium cycle race and a time trial race. I got a bronze medal in the crit cycle race. And then I did rowing, and I did the 4 minutes endurance row and the 1 minute sprint row. And I got the gold medal in the 4 minutes endurance row. So subsequently coming back from the games, British Rowing were definitely like, yes, we want a bit of that. Come to us. So that's when I probably went full time on the rowing program. Bearing in mind, this is September 23. What subsequently followed then was December. I raced at the British Rowing Indoor Championships and became British Indoor Rowing Champion. I then went out to Europe in the February and the March of 2024 and raced for Great Britain in indoor rowing and became European and World Indoor Rowing Champion. I was like pinching myself going, what the hell is going on here? Like, this is mental. So that was my indoor rowing journey to world champion. So Invictus, British, European, and world champion I'd become. So all in the space of 4 months. So I was like, this is pretty phenomenal and really cool. And then shortly after coming back from the indoor championships, I was subsequently asked, look, Paris Paralympics is down the road. You know, you're in contention. You're a strong rower. Would you like to go forward for selection for the Paris Paralympics? And I was like, wow, is this real? Like, where's the cameras? Like, is this a TV show that I've been filmed for the last few months? Like, I've been through such shit and such hardship and lost so much previously that this is like a really cool opportunity. And I said, yeah, definitely. And yeah, the way it all works, went to trials in April of 2024, obviously in contention to go to the games, and unfortunately missed out by a fractional margin. But what a phenomenal experience, and what a really cool journey to be part of, to be being paid as a full-time professional athlete, to be world indoor rowing champion, and to be around like-minded, driven sports people again was really cool. And again, like I said, to be able to wear the Union flag and represent the country in a different way this time was also super cool. So yeah, that was a bit long-winded, but just to give good context behind the journey.
You still row today, Ben?
Yes, yeah. I was on the erg this morning, and I'm on the water tomorrow morning.
What is the I imagine that it's a fundamental difference between rowing on the erg and then rowing on the actual water. And then when you're rowing on the water, is it just you singular, or are you with a team? And I suppose that has an added dynamic to it as well.
Yeah, so I'll come back to that point in a second. So moving forward, obviously, the opportunity to go to Paris was really cool. I went out and watched the games. I was there to support the team for all their races, and then I came back, did a bit of racing in the UK, and then the build up over that period of time was pretty relentless. Being on the GB program as on a world class program is 6 sessions a week, 6 days a week, 3 sessions a day. So that's pretty full on in itself. You can't do anything else. So I got to January of last year, and I basically got to the point where I was a little bit like, this is pretty full on. I need to have a bit of a break. And you're not allowed to do anything while you're on the program. Even you're not allowed to ride a motorbike. So because it's classed as a dangerous sport, I couldn't go skiing. I couldn't do anything. So my life was not necessarily on hold, but all my hobbies and interests were paused. Paragliding, all that kind of stuff. So it was quite difficult. It was very rewarding, but quite difficult at the same time because I had no outlet. My outlets were going for a ride on my bike or going paragliding or going skiing with friends, and I couldn't do that. So in the January of last year, I obviously handed in my notice and came away from the squad. Um, so I carried on rowing. Obviously, I still do row because I don't want to lose that. I'm nowhere near as fit as I used to be, but I'm slowly building it back up. So erging and on the water, flat water rowing are very, very similar actually. So there's a very similar correlation between the two. Hence why erging is massively part of the rowing program. And like you say, the only difference comes is when you're in a squad boat or you've got multiple seats in a boat, or if you're sweeping. So sweeping is single blade, sculling is two blades per person, and I row singular. So I mainly scull. I can sweep, but I mainly scull. So two blades. And the build up to Paris was in a mixed double, so male and female in a doubles boat sculling. So again, there's some videos on YouTube of me and Sam training for the Paris Paralympics. So yeah, that was the dynamics of the boat. I currently mainly row in a double with a male or a female, and I spend time in the boat on my own, rowing in a single scull. So yeah, a mix of boats.
I think it's an incredible story, like an absolute incredible story, and I totally get the rise to fame or the rise to success in the rowing space. You know what I mean? It's an incredible story, but also the how intense that training must have been
Yeah,
afterwards. Do you know what I mean? So you still row for fun.
yeah. I wouldn't call
What?
it.
Yeah,
It's
to
still
keep
row.
to keep in shape.
Yeah.
What are you doing now?
So I'm in a bit of a weird position at the moment. So I'm still doing all that I do in terms of what I've developed over the last few years. So I deliver outdoor adventure events up in the Lake District. I do keynote speaking, talking about my journey from complex trauma to elite sports. I'm just setting up my own company, which will be the corporate side of that complex trauma to elite sport. So understanding risk and building resilience in the workplace, both as an individual, or sorry, from being an individual through being a team into a corporate enterprise. What does that look like? How do you develop? How do you understand risk? All that kind of stuff. So that's really cool. I find that super rewarding. Um, I row recreationally, so again, I race throughout the summer now and again, and enjoy the sport on the water, especially when the weather's like this. And I still compete indoors. So I've raced at the British Rowing Indoor Championships and held my title as British Indoor Champion for the last 3 years. Um, but I haven't yet gone back overseas and raced on the European and the world stage. They tend to alternate it year in, year out. So one year it'll be virtual, and then they'll try and host it somewhere. So this year was virtual, which I didn't. I was away. I didn't end up doing. I'm a ski instructor, so I volunteer my time with a charity called the Armed Forces Para Snow Sport Team, which I mentioned earlier. I came through them as a beneficiary, and I'm now the Alpine manager and director, operations director. So I deliver on snow training as an Alpine ski instructor, but also as an adaptive ski instructor as well, helping injured veterans either get into the snow environment or get back to the snow environment following injuries. And then I have my own hobbies. So yeah, paragliding. I'm going to look at a new motorbike this afternoon. So yeah, I enjoy extreme sports. I enjoy keeping fit. Massive fitness enthusiast. And I love supporting people through mental health. So I get a lot of people reach out to me through social media, asking me for, little hints and tips or goals, or they might say they're struggling in this way. How can I get myself out of this rut? Or again, sports. Coming on to sports, I'm an ambassador for a charity called the Mintridge Foundation, and we do talks to schools, colleges, and universities. So young kids talking about resilience, talking about mindset, talking about sports, and how the benefit of sport is massive to all of us. And like I said, and have covered, sport helped me massively when I was in the military, whilst I was serving, but it helped me enormously when I was going through my injuries. It gave me so much focus and direction, and to allow me to go on and do what I've done is super cool. So yeah, I do all of that kind of stuff as well. So it's a really cool journey, and a really cool opportunity to be involved in so many different things. Have you heard of Ikigai?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was having a conversation with someone probably about 2 years ago, and someone said to me, Ben, I think you found your Ikigai. And I sort of scratched my head and went, mate, what the fuck are you talking about? And he went, no, go and research it. You'll understand what I mean when you read it. And I did. I went away and researched it, and I read bits of the book, and I was like, actually, yeah, I think I have. I found my reason for my purpose and my reason for being, and that is that helping others overcome adversity, helping others build and understand resilience, helping others develop a strong mindset through outdoor adventure, through sport, through challenging events. So yeah, super cool, super rewarding journey that I've been on. Except for 2019, we won't go back there. It doesn't exist anymore. But again, mindset. Like if I hadn't have been through that, as much as I look back at pictures now of me broken, having gone through 7 major surgeries, laying in a hospital bed, literally in bits. As much as I never wish that on myself or anyone else, that's allowed me to go on to do so much. And I met Kate out the back of it. I've gone on to become world indoor rowing champion out the back of it. I've gone on to set up my own companies and blah, blah, blah. There's so many things that I've done out the back of it. Invictus Games, I coached 2025's indoor rowing team out in Canada, in Vancouver. I've just applied to coach the next team to go to Birmingham in 27. So I wouldn't be doing those things if I was still, yes, I'd still be in a cool environment doing some pretty alley stuff around the world, having an impact somewhere. But, the fallout of what I've been through is, it's pretty cool. So
I think it's brilliant, mate.
An amazing story.
Cheers, guys.
Mate, it's class. Right? We've got a common. So you trained for you coach for the 2025 team. A good friend of mine's Ian Barham. So Ian went out and obviously represented in the Invictus Games, and it makes me laugh so much because he obviously did indoor rowing, but he also did like luge, and I think that is just like the coolest story. Hey, honestly, it's been an incredible chat. We could chat to you all day, Ben. Honestly, it's a fascinating story, and that ability to overcome resilience, and that not to link to Paul's shirt, but the life giving you lemons, mate. What you do with it. This is a podcast. Nothing wrong with the shirt, mate. Ben, if you were to give one bit of advice for a veteran or someone still serving who's maybe just in a particularly difficult place, what's the one bit of advice you'd give them that could maybe or helped you, or maybe they could use just to help pull themselves out of it?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer, hand on heart, that I am sat here today doing what I'm doing because of the resilience that I exposed myself before my injuries. So if I'd have not pushed myself, if I'd have not challenged myself regularly, if I'd have not pushed the boundaries a little bit and got out of my comfort zone, I'm not sure I'd be sat where I'm sat today. And I'm not saying that has to happen at that point. I'm not sure that I'm not saying that that's not changeable following adversity or trauma. But what I'm saying is, by challenging yourself, by getting out of your comfort zone, by testing yourself every now and again, by not sitting at home and feeling sorry for yourself, by not blaming others, by not, chasing a label, be your own destiny, follow your mindset, and if it's not great, seek help. But find help enough to get you in the space, to get you in the mindset where you can challenge yourself again, where you can test your limits, where you can push yourself a little bit. Because that resilience, we're not born. I did this talk last week. We're not born with a cell or an organ in our body that's called resilience. And then when the shit hits the fan, we dive in and pull some out, and then over time it rebuilds. That's not the case. Resilience is built through the environments that we put ourselves in. So go and build that resilience, because God forbid you'll never need it, and if you do need it, it's there. And definitely for military personnel, you've already done a lot of outstanding stuff that the civilian population would only dream of doing. Continue with that mindset that you had back when you joined the military, when you joined your CAP badge, when you pushed yourself a little bit to do a challenging course or a challenging sporting event with like-minded and driven colleagues that you used to work with. Get that mindset back again. Go and push yourself and go and build that resilience. Because trust me, that's hand on heart. That has allowed me to get to where I am today. Because by doing what I've done and challenging myself and pushing myself, that's allowed me to get to where I am, probably recover quicker than I should have done, and then bounce back to probably further than what I would have achieved through my time in the military. So, yeah, that's the bit of advice I'd give. I know that was a little bit long, but go push yourself, go test yourself, get back in that environment. And sport, fitness, the endorphins that we get, the reward that we get from it, whether you pass, fail, come first or last, you've still had a go. You've still pushed yourself. You've still benefited from those fitness elements, those endorphins, and that's super rewarding, but also super important for the mental and physical well-being. So yeah, that's my biggest bit of advice, really.
Mate, Ben, thank you so much for giving it your time, my friend, and all the best with everything you're doing in the future.
Cheers, guys. I will look
Cheers,
forward
buddy.
to catching up with you soon.
Take care, mate.